The word terrorist gets thrown around a lot these days. We see it on the news, hear it from politicians. But what does it really mean? Who gets to decide who is a terrorist and who isn't? Often the label is applied to groups and individuals who challenge the status quo, who dare to resist the powerful. But what about those in power themselves? What happens when governments, particularly those in the West, engage in actions that spread terror and suffering around the world? Should we label them as terrorists too? This is not about justifying violence. It is about questioning the narratives we are told. It is about looking beyond the carefully crafted image of benevolent democracies and confronting the uncomfortable realities of history and the present. For decades, Western governments have presented themselves as beacons of freedom and human rights, intervening in conflicts and shaping the global order. But is this a complete picture? Or is there a darker side to this story, one marked by hypocrisy, violence, and a relentless pursuit of self-interest? To answer these questions, we must be willing to critically examine the historical record. We must look beyond the rhetoric of good intentions and analyze the impact of Western foreign policy. We must listen to the voices of those who have been silenced, those who have experienced the consequences of these policies firsthand. Only then can we begin to understand the true nature of power and challenge the systems that perpetuate violence and injustice in our world. The history of Western engagement with the rest of the world is a complex and often troubling one. For centuries, European powers built empires through colonization, exploiting resources and subjugating entire populations under the banner of civilizing missions. From the Americas to Africa and Asia, the legacy of colonialism is etched in the collective memory of those who endured its brutal realities. The transatlantic slave trade, a horrific chapter in human history, stands as a stark reminder of the capacity for cruelty and greed that fueled these imperial ambitions. While colonialism may be officially over, its echoes reverberate in the neo-colonial practices of the present. The Cold War, a period often touted as a victory for democracy over tyranny, was also marked by countless interventions in the global South. Western powers, driven by ideological imperatives and strategic interests, propped up dictators, toppled democratically elected governments, and fueled proxy wars that devastated entire regions. The case of apartheid South Africa is a particularly glaring example of Western hypocrisy. While condemning the racist regime's policies of segregation and oppression, many Western governments, motivated by economic and strategic concerns, continued to support the apartheid government, providing them with arms and investments. This selective outrage, where certain injustices are condemned while others are ignored or even supported, exposes the double standards that often underpin Western foreign policy. It is not only on the international stage that we see these patterns of hypocrisy and violence play out. Within their own borders, Western governments have a long and troubling history of silencing dissent and targeting individuals who dare to challenge the established order. From the persecution of labor organizers and anti-war activists to the mass surveillance of citizens and the suppression of minority voices, the tools of repression have been employed time and again to maintain control and silence those who threaten the status quo. The civil rights movement in the United States offers a stark illustration of this dynamic. Despite fighting for basic human rights and equality within a supposedly democratic society, figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X faced constant harassment, intimidation, and violence from government agencies. Their assassinations, along with countless others who dared to raise their voices against injustice, serve as a chilling reminder of the price of dissent. These acts of repression are not relics of a bygone era. In the digital age, new forms of censorship and surveillance have emerged, often justified in the name of national security or combating terrorism. Whistleblowers who expose government wrongdoing are persecuted. Journalists who report on sensitive issues are intimidated or silenced, and activists who challenge corporate power face legal challenges and character assassination. The message is clear. Those who dare to speak truth to power do so at their own peril. The legacy of these historical injustices continues to shape the world today, from the ongoing conflict in Palestine where Western powers have consistently supported Israel's occupation and human rights violations against Palestinians, to the resource wars in Africa, where multinational corporations, often backed by their home governments, exploit resources and fuel conflict, the patterns of exploitation and violence persist. Capitalism, with its insatiable appetite for profit and its inherent inequalities, plays a central role in perpetuating these injustices. The drive to secure markets, resources and cheap labor fuels conflicts, undermines democracy and exacerbates existing social and economic disparities. From the sweatshops of Bangladesh to the oil fields of Nigeria, the human cost of this economic system is often ignored in the pursuit of profit. The question we must ask ourselves is, can we truly address these systemic issues without confronting the root causes? Can we talk about peace and justice while ignoring the systems that profit from war and exploitation? The answer, I believe, is a resounding no. We cannot address the symptoms without confronting the disease. We cannot hope to create a more just and equitable world without challenging the structures of power that perpetuate these injustices. It is time to move beyond the rhetoric of good intentions and demand real change. It is time to hold those in power accountable for their actions and create a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect.